8 bone-chilling psychiatric ward stories. The staff's dark secrets haunt forever in the shadows of Whispering Pines Psychiatric Hospital. An air of dread clung to every crumbling wall, every flickering fluorescent light. This place held secrets so thick they choked the very breath from visitors. An old nurse, her hands trembling, spoke of patients who had vanished without a trace, their whispers still echoing in the empty corridors. Some said this place was cursed, a cradle of darkness where even the bravest souls wouldn't dare tread. Picture it. The scent of antiseptic mixed with something else, something sweet yet rotting. The sound of distant screams, muffled yet piercing, floating through the air like a deadly melody. It was said that Lieutenant Danny, a war veteran committed here, would sometimes sit in the common room and laugh, but it was a laugh tinged with madness. "They're coming for me," he'd mutter, eyes wide with terror, as shadows passed by him and no one else was there. The staff always hurried, wore expressions of tight-lipped anxiety. There were strange rules that seemed to change daily, protocols that made no sense. On dark nights, grating screams erupted only to fade into silence, like a cruel joke played by the walls themselves. How anyone could sleep here was a mystery, but sleep was a luxury, and many found themselves pacing restlessly, eyes darting through the flickering light. Every person who entered that ward carried a tale, a darkness that seeped into their bones. The janitor, old Mr. Johnson, had found himself staring at a mirror one evening, only to see not his reflection but a flash of a long-lost patient, lips moving as if trying to speak. He swore he felt cold fingers pressing against his heart just before he ran outside, gasping for the fresh air of reality. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. It was the night of the annual gala that the real horror unfolded. The staff dressed in their best, laughter echoing across the dining hall. But in the depths of the ward, the real drama was brewing. As the clock struck midnight, lights flickered ominously, and a single haunting note played on the piano, but there was no one to play it. Suddenly, the fire alarm blared, sending a rush of administration staff into the hall, leaving the patients behind. You could feel the tension in the air, a heavy weight of impending doom. Whispers filled the room as patients began to rise, agitated, the atmosphere crackling with fear. The nurses were overwhelmed, their faces pale, eyes darting as shadows loomed closer. What was really happening behind the smiles and laughter? What lay hidden beneath the surface? But as the alarms screamed louder, the shadows danced, and something sinister began to awaken. It was only a matter of time before the truth clawed its way to the surface. The very existence of the ward was at stake, and with it the lives, the sanity of everyone still clinging inside. Each heartbeat was a countdown to chaos, begging the question who would be left standing when the dust settled? The fire alarm blared like a wounded beast, drowning out the hushed whispers of the patients. The walls trembled, vibrating with the frenetic energy swirling in the air. Assaulted by the mounting anxiety, the remaining staff struggled to maintain order, their frantic footsteps echoing in the cold, sterile hallways. As they rushed to evacuate everyone from the dining hall, their anxiety cracked like glass beneath the weight of dread. In the common room, Lieutenant Danny's laughter transformed into frenetic shrieks, blending with the alarm's wails. "They're coming! They're finally coming!" he screeched, eyes wild, darting from shadow to shadow. His long fingers trembled, clutching the armrest of his chair as if it were his last lifeline. His paranoia was contagious. Patients who had remained docile began to rise. Muffled voices stirred and they shuffled, displaced but hungry for chaos. A woman in a faded green hospital gown, her hair unkempt, suddenly grinned a sinister smile that spread wider than seemed humanly possible. "The clock is ticking," she said, her voice a raspy whisper, sending chills down the spines of those who dared to lock eyes with her. Outside the ward, the staff frantically attempted to account for the patients. "Nurse! Where's Smith?" a voice shouted, but the nurse was already gone. In the chaotic rush, names and faces blurred into an indistinct haze. No one seemed to notice the peculiar absence of one particular patient sitting quietly in the corner. David, dressed in an orange gown, he observed it all with a frightening calmness, a minor flicker of amusement curling his lips in the dim light. The shadows in the corner stretched and twisted, warping into grotesque shapes. All around, the atmosphere throbbed, a living entity that thrummed with anticipation. With each pulse of the alarm, fear surged, peppered with an electrifying, almost foreshadowing excitement. Suddenly, the lights flickered and a deep, unnatural silence swept through the ward. The alarm cut off abruptly, but the dull thud of a heartbeat echoed ominously, reverberating in the ears of those trapped within. The patients, paralyzed by uncertainty, turned toward the sound, their fear mingling with a strange sense of expectation. Danny's laughter erupted again, manic and disjointed. "They've finally come to collect." He rose awkwardly, an old soldier baffled by a war he no longer understood. The fear that climbed into his throat squeezed painfully, but curiosity tugged at the edges of his sanity. The now dark hallway behind him thrummed, beckoning. Would one of them take a step into the unknown or transform their fear into something more dangerous? With a loud crash, a nearby door flung open as if kicked by a spirit born from the earth's shadows. The nurses screamed, terror radiating from their eyes as they stumbled back, the glimmers of trapped light shimmering into darkness. And as chaos threatened to spill all over the ward, a collective gasp echoed through the crowd. The air thickened again, a stifling force that enveloped everyone inside the ward. In that heartbeat of quiet, a voice broke through, the voice of a long-dead patient, resonating with clarity. "Help me. I'm still here." The realization hung in the air, palpable and wretched. What if the missing patients had never really left? What if they were still inside those haunted walls, hidden in plain sight, waiting for their requiem? Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, illuminating the ward. Faces twisted with horror, eyes scanning for the source of the voice. And then it struck a chilling thought. Had the fire alarm set something loose? The line between reality and madness blurred, and the night's true terror had just begun. What secrets would unfold when the patients and staff were forced to confront their deepest fears? As silence crept back, the stillness crackled with unspoken dread. Just when they thought the worst was over, another piercing voice echoed. "You're not alone." Who or what was waiting? And just how deeply did the shadow stretch into the past? The patients held their breath, stricken into stunned silence, eyes wide with a mix of terror and curiosity. A shiver ran through the crowd as the shadows around them deepened, creeping like tendrils reaching for the lost and the discarded. No one dared to move. The unease solidified into a tangible mass pressing down on their chests. Danny's laughter faded into a low chuckle, as though he were in on a secret that everyone else was still grappling with. "You think you're safe?" His voice was husky, tainted with an edge of something unhinged. "They'll find you. Just like they found me." The very air crackled with his manic energy, igniting further whispers among the patients. A figure emerged from the corner, the woman in the faded green gown. Her smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed to glint in the harsh fluorescent light. "Oh, the clock is ticking, you see. You can't hide forever." She raised her hands, fingers like claws poised to grasp something unseen, followed by a chorus of affirmatives echoing from the room, growing louder with each word. "We are waiting." A nurse stumbled forward, breaking the spell of silence like glass shattering against concrete. "Everyone follow me. This way." Her voice quivered, frantic, though the sound felt distant, as if she were locked in another reality. But the staff was fading fast, their ranks thinning under the weight of the unknown. Panic bled into the crowd, fingers clutched tightly around arms and chairs, but the fear of fleeing felt equally terrifying. Then, with spine-chilling certainty, the overhead lights began to blink erratically, pulsing in time with that mocking heartbeat. Shadows danced grotesquely as whispers turned into shouts. The ward had come alive, the boundaries of sanity decaying. "Help us! You can't leave us!" shouted a voice from the dark. The demand was primal, echoing the deepest human fear: abandonment. David, still seated in the corner, now locked eyes with the nurse. His calmness was unnerving. "You're all searching for a way out, but what if the exit is the true trap?" He spoke softly, yet his words seemed to wind their way into her very soul, making her skin crawl. "It's not the darkness you should fear. It's the light that guides you." The nurse faltered, doubt creeping into her mind as a chill tickled her spine. Was it too late? Had she already failed to safeguard those entrusted to her? The room pulsated with malice thick and tangible, wrapping every patient and staff member in a shroud of uncertainty. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the end of the hall, a door slamming hard against its frame. The sound forced every eye to turn, every heart to race. What came next were silhouettes outlined by the dimmest light. Shadows flitted, jagged and fast, crossing the threshold into the ward. Someone or something was approaching. Danny's laughter spiraled out of control again, forming a cacophony of dread. They're here. The collectors have arrived. He spun in circles, enjoyment mixing with insanity, pushing the fragile boundary of reason. The shadows drew closer, headlights flickering into life as they entered the ward, the unmistakable silhouettes of the missing. Confused and hollow-eyed, they appeared like apparitions, ghosts molded from blurry memories of a past kept secret. The walls resonated with their lost whispers, each cry pulling deeper into the chilling void. Help us find peace, the faintest voice invited from behind the throng, drawing the attention of the most terrified souls. Would they heed this call, step forward into that haunting darkness? Or would the arrival of their past be too much to bear? As the tension crackled in the air, the bright lights flickered once before plunging everyone back into darkness, leaving them in a grip of suspense and fear. Desperate eyes scanned the blackness. What awaited them in the abyss? Their fates hung precariously in the balance. What could emerge when buried secrets from a bygone era finally clawed their way into the light? The silence that followed was deafening, a scraping tension hanging heavy in the air. Then came the whispers, first a faint rustling, like leaves caught in an autumn breeze. They escalated into desperate cries. Each voice seemed to reach out from the past, pulling at the heartstrings of the present, threatening to unravel them completely. Help us. We're lost. We're forgotten. The echo of those voices bounced around the ward, prickling the skin of the onlookers, igniting an icy fear that sunk deep into their bones. The shadows moved forward, the light revealing pale faces, hollow stares, eyes that flickered with a chaotic mixture of hope and despair as they fell upon the living. A woman, her gown tattered and muddied, lifted her hand. Please. You can see me. You can save me. I remember. Yet, instead of comfort, her words incited terror. Murmurs rippled through the room. No one dared step forward, rooted in their place as though the ground had turned to quicksand. Danny cackled again in the gathering gloom, a laugh that seemed to pierce the air with unrestrained madness. You think she's here to help? She's just another bait in this twisted game. Amid the chaos, the nurse, still trying to find her way through the confusion, felt her resolve crumbling. With every heartbeat, the ward felt tighter, suffocating her under its malevolence. We need to stick together, she shouted, her voice cracking, but the statement hung limp in the thick atmosphere, met with hollow gazes and shaken heads as the electric lights sputtered once more, casting eerie shapes across faces twisted with horror. David suddenly broke his fixed stare. Every choice brings consequences, he whispered gravely, his voice cutting through the noise with a chilling clarity. One step closer to the dark could mean losing everything, who you are, who you love. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle like ashes in their chests, then added, or worse, becoming a part of this. What do you mean? A voice called from the back, barely above a whisper, fear drenching every syllable. David turned, his expression shifting, shadows lengthening across his face. You want to know what happens to those who succumb to the darkness? They become lost, and the darkness wins. He gestured toward the figures moving behind him, the twisted ghouls that seemed to drift on the cusp of reality and nightmare. They are waiting for you to make that choice. The nurse shuddered, heart racing. She had to act. They had to run. But the very walls of the ward seemed to close in, pulsating, alive with a wicked will. Suddenly, disembodied laughter erupted from all corners of the room, mixing grotesquely with the cries of the anguished souls. Run or stay, it doesn't matter. They'll always come. The shadows danced as one of the figures lunged forward, eyes ablaze. Terror punctured the air. Screams erupted around her, people shoving and pushing toward the only perceived escape, the doors. But the doors wouldn't budge. They were locked, held fast by cruel hands of fate. Panic flooded the ward as bodies collided, confusion morphing into sheer terror. Run! Someone has to. Then came a sudden crash, and the lights flickered again, the shadows shifting like dark waves breaking against an unseen shore. A piercing wail rang out, silencing everything momentarily, leaving only the heartbeat of fear echoing in their ears. The woman in the green gown stepped closer to the nurse, her sinister smile widening into an unnatural grin. "We are waiting for you to make your choice." As she extended her hand, the tendrils of darkness snaked around her fingers, pulling each gaze, each heart, into the overpowering abyss of uncertainty. What revelation awaited in the void? Would they choose to fight against the darkness, or would they succumb to it like so many before them? The line blurred as dread enveloped them once more, leaving a haunting question in the air. Whose secrets would finally be unearthed, and at what cost? The nurse's heart raced as the woman's hand lingered in the gloom, her fingers weaving through the shadows that encroached like hungry vipers. The screams around her became a distant echo. The chaos faded into a frightening silence. This was it. This was the moment. Decisions thrummed in the air, each pulse heavier than the last. "Don't look away. Focus." The nurse willed her feet to move, forcing herself to confront the ghastly vision before her. But as she looked back at the other patients, their faces were twisted, reflecting a mixture of desperation and horror. They were frozen, entranced by the promise that hung in the air like a noxious fog. "Help her. She's not lost," a rasping voice from the crowd shouted, breaking the spell for a fleeting moment. Someone pushed forward, a man with shadowed eyes, haunted by his past. "What if she is? What if she is leading us to doom?" Another voice countered, trembling with doubt. The man's determination faltered, uncertainty clawing at the edges of his courage. Danny saw his moment and seized it. "Everything you touch here corrupts. Don't you get it? Each hand you hold, each promise you chase, this isn't salvation. It's a trap." He threw himself against the wall, fingers clawing at the paint as if trying to tear down the barrier between the living and the macabre. Despite the gloom, the nurse felt a glimmer of defiance. "We need to stick together. David, can you help us?" she called, her voice slicing through the dread. But David was motionless, his mouth barely moving as he stared at the gathering darkness. "She isn't just a ghost, she is a harbinger. We can't save her. She wants us all." At those words the woman's grin widened, her presence becoming more unstable, pulsating as if she were 2 steps away from unraveling into nothingness. "I offer what they can't," she whispered, her voice wrapping around the nurse. "Freedom from the pain that binds you." A collective gasp filled the ward, fear solidifying like ice in their veins. Freedom? The thought flickered like a dying candle. Each of them had come here bearing the weight of their past. What would it mean to let go? The man who had first broken rank stumbled back. "No, you can't. You each have to fight," he gasped, eyes wild. "No, listen," the nurse shouted, a surge of resolve filling her. "If we stay here, we will become part of this darkness just as much as they have." But it was too late. Danny lunged forward, reaching for the ghostly woman, desperation painting his features in a frenzied stroke. The moment contact was made, a blinding flash lit the room, engulfing them all. In the chaos, shadows twisted and elongated, spiraling toward the ceiling in wild arcs. They could feel the very walls twisting, breathing with a foul hunger. The air simmered thick with whispers that clawed at the edges of sanity. Suddenly, the lights flickered once more, and in their brief glow, the ghostly figures appeared, transformed faces of anguish and despair morphing into something more profound, more terrifying. They were no longer individual spirits. They melded into one massive form, a horrific amalgamation of lost souls reaching out with spectral appendages. "Join us," they moaned, voices woven in a pitiful chorus. "Find peace." The nurse fell to her knees, fighting against the darkness that threatened to engulf her spirit. "We're not lost," she yelled. "We are stronger than this." Her cry hung in the air, resonating against the cacophony, but she could feel it, the tendrils of darkness attempting to wrap around her heart, pulling her closer to despair. Where was the line? And what would it cost to cross it? As they reeled on the brink of choice, the room spiraled into terrifying uncertainty, leaving the question echoing in their minds. Who among them would choose to dive into the depths, and who would fight to resurface? With shadows about to swallow them whole, the nurse's determination shattered the silence. "We have to fight. Together." But even as she said the words, doubt spread like poison. How could they stand against the weight of lives lost and promises broken? And from the center of that anxious dread, another voice rang out, one they had not expected. But what if surviving means becoming the darkness? The air thickened, and their collective breath held tight, locked in the tension of what could come next. The moment hung suspended, heavy with breathless anticipation. The spectral mass before them pulsated, flickering in and out like a dying star. Each wave of despair that emanated from its multitude of lost souls sent chills racing down the nurse's spine. Sweat trickled down her temples, mixing with the fear that clouded her mind. "Fight the whispers," she instructed, her voice strained but resolute. "We can't let them in." But doubt sprawled its dark fingers through the crowd. Faces they once recognized twisted into masks of terror and confusion. Danny was crouched low, his eyes darting as if seeking an escape from the malevolence that loomed closer. The shadows writhed as if they were animated by their collective fear, morphing into grotesque shapes, their claws reaching to ensnare anyone who faltered. "She's right. We have to remember who we are," shouted David, breaking from his stupor. He stood tall, fists clenched, facing the looming darkness with newfound resolve. The flicker of recognition sparked in the eyes of the others. "Think of all we've survived. Don't let them take that away." With every word, the ghostly amalgamation seemed to convulse, a violent reaction to their rising defiance. "You cannot escape us," it crooned in a chorus that made the air crackle and burn. Anxiety slashed through the room, gnawing at their resolve as each anguished face twisted even further into despair. "Hold on to each other," the nurse implored, reaching out to Danny, who was trembling violently. "You are not alone in this. We are stronger together." She could feel the suffocating grip of despair trying to tug at her heart, every moment becoming a brutal struggle for breath. The shadows tightened their grip, feeding on insecurities until the air became thick with palpable terror. Each anguished wail from the mass of lost souls sent new shivers down her spine, intensifying the urge to yield, to surrender to the dark promise of peace. But the spirit of her patients clung to that glimmer of hope. One by one, hands began to reach out, forming a chain. "Together we fight," David shouted, and the chorus grew louder. They were not just individuals, they were a collective, a unit refusing to dissolve into the void. The apparition shrieked, the terrible noise vibrating through the walls. "You think you're safe? You think you understand pain?" It loomed, a sinister specter of all their regrets and fears, and coiled tighter around them like a noose. Suddenly the lights blazed bright. The nurse felt the fiery heat wash over her, eclipsing the chill of despair. "We can create our own light," she exclaimed. "Don't give in." As she spoke, a luminous spark ignited within her. It flickered at first, then blazed to life, radiating warmth and strength. One by one, her companions joined in, their spirits kindling into a brilliant flare of defiance. And then came the whispers, slithering through the air with chilling clarity. "One must embrace the darkness to understand it. We're not afraid of you," Danny shouted, his voice wild with passion. "You don't define us." The darkness recoiled, its grasp weakening as their united front illuminated the gloom. The spectral form began to thrash violently, struggling against the growing light. It was a furious battle now, a wild contrast of brilliance against obscurity that threatened to swallow them whole. Each pulse of energy pushed the shadows further away, causing the walls to shudder. "Keep it alive. We need to fight together," the nurse cried, her heart pounding with every word. But just as victory seemed to flicker within reach, a bone-chilling silence fell. A shadow detached itself from the mass, larger than the others, a harbinger more dreadful than the rest. It approached with an eerie calm, its voice slithering through the air like smoke. "Will you sacrifice your souls to save one?" it rasped, an insidious grin twisting across its face. The question hung in the air, sharp and sharp-edged, as panic washed over each of them. The room froze, breaths held tight as they considered what would come next. Would they really be forced to choose? A heavy silence engulfed the room, the air thick with dread and disbelief. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in the minds of the terrified group. The spectral figure loomed larger, its dark tendrils curling around each person, searching for weakness, for fear to latch onto. "What do you mean, save one?" Danny's voice trembled, uncertain but fierce, as beads of sweat trickled down his face. He was taut with anxiety, eyes darting between his friends and the hovering apparition that threatened to devour them all. "Don't listen to it," the nurse urged, struggling to rally their spirits. "It's using your fear against you." But she too felt the weight of that question pressing down, stifling her thoughts. Would they really have to choose? The darkness whispered tempting imaginings of sanctuary, of safety for one in exchange for the others. "Think of what that would mean," it whispered sweetly. "One life saved, untold suffering averted. Think of the peace it could bring." David's brow furrowed, realization creeping in. "It wants us to turn on each other," he said, his voice steadying. "That's how it thrives." The group stood a little taller, bolstered by his words. They had been through too much to fall prey to this creature's malevolent game. A flicker of resistance sparked again within the nurse. "We are here together, every soul matters. We will not choose." Her voice rang out with clarity, igniting a shared fire inside them all. The entity recoiled, its features distorting with rage. "You are merely delaying the inevitable. Time will make you choose. It always does." Each word dripped with scorn. Yet, in that moment something shifted. The light they had created pulsed brighter, forming a shield against the encroaching shadows. Together they would resist. But the air thickened, almost suffocating. For every ounce of defiance they conjured, the entity responded with renewed ferocity. It streamed toward them, a wave of dark energy that intertwined their fears and regrets into a chaotic whirlwind. "Remember your darkest moments, embrace them, feel them." The figure hissed, every word a dagger aimed at their hearts. Shadows drifted into their minds, pulling memories to the surface. The pain festered anew, threatening to tear at the fabric of their unity. "No!" Danny cried out, slapping his hands over his ears, as if he could block out the torment. "We're not afraid of what we've been through. We survived for a reason." The nurse locked eyes with him. "That's it. We must harness those moments, not let them weaken us." Suddenly each of them began to remember not just the pain, but also the triumph, the laughter, the kindness they had shared. A vivid tapestry of their experiences unfolded, each recollection weaving into the golden thread of their collective existence. As the shadows lunged forward, they instinctively raised their illuminated hands, a barrier born from the lives they cherished. "Together we are stronger," they shouted in unison, voices blending into a cacophony of determination. The apparition howled, its form rippling in protest as the brilliance surged forth, threatening to burst the bonds of its darkness. But just then, a chilling realization washed over the nurse. As they crafted their shield of light, the specter drew closer. "You may bar the incoming darkness," it spat, "but can you hold on to your secrets?" "What secrets?" she gasped, confusion and fear creeping back in. The shadow seemed to smile wider. "The ones it takes to survive the sacrifices made the choices that haunt you." And in that instant, like shattered glass, the bonds of their past began to splinter, each shard shining dark truths and sins. As the blinding light flickered, a terrifying question whispered through the air. What have you done to survive the madness? Was their fight for survival still truly about unity, or was there an even darker side to their resistance? The shadows twisted further, creeping around them like serpents. Each breath felt like a struggle against invisible hands tightening around their throats. The air was heavy with the weight of their unspoken truths. One by one, the memories clawed their way into the light, manifesting twisted images that hovered in the space between them and the darkness. Danny's face contorted in horror as images of his past flickered in front of him. His brother's anguished screams from that night, the haunting guilt that had become his constant companion. "No, we can't show it," he screamed, clutching his head, his body shaking. "Danny, listen to me," the nurse shouted, her own fear battling against her resolve. "If we fight against it, it will lose its power. Embrace what you feel, but don't let it consume you." Behind her, David quaked, his hands trembling. He recalled the day he turned his back on a friend in need. What cost did that decision carry? The truth was raw and stinging. "How do we fight what we've done?" he whispered, his voice cracking. A dark chuckle cut through the tension. The entity had spread its tendrils closer, its form pulsating with a sinister delight. "This is your penance," it taunted, the air thick with malice. "Your guilt, your pain, each whispering your sins." Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed through the cacophony of despair. "You think standing together will save you. But what if the truth is too heavy? It was a voice all too familiar, one they thought they had left behind. The nurse's heart dropped. "Emily, is that you?" It was one of them. Taken by the very darkness they were now facing, a figure materialized, eyes hollow and brimming with despair. "You left me behind. Left me to rot while you ran," it moaned, grief and anger surfacing. "I was the weakest. The one you didn't save." "No." The nurse stepped forward, her hands trembling. "We can't let it twist our memories. It wants us to sink into that pain." But her voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in as doubt nipped at her heels. The others began to hear echoes of their own failures. A sob escaped David as he saw images of people he had lost, of decisions made in panic and fear. The cabin, the fire, everything spiraled before him in a chaotic rush. "What if this is all we are?" he whispered, terror pooling in his gut. Danny clenched his fists, feeling the pressure of every accusation in the room. "It wants us to believe we're failures. That we can't change." His voice boomed through the fear, but inside he wavered. Could they truly fight the darkness without facing their past? As their resolve slipped, tendrils of shadow began to weave tighter around them. It fed on their regret, pulling their strength away, feasting on their fears. The entity surged forward, its voice a thunderous scare. "Why go on? You can be free. Give in to the darkness, choose, or have it choose for you." Waves of despair crashed against their hearts as the boundaries of their unity threatened to break. Each memory was a knife twisting deeper, each secret a weight pushing them under. "Stop!" shouted the nurse, desperation rising. "We can't let it win. We have to lay the truth bare, face it together." There was a tremor in her throat, but she refused to falter. In her eyes something flickered. The memory of laughter, light, and hope ignited among them. They had survived the worst. Would they let that demon strip them of their strength? But even as the light began to pulse brighter, the shadows surged back, vying for control. "Do you truly think confronting your sins will set you free?" the figure crooned. "I promise nothing but regret, remember. You're only as strong as your weakest link." As the entity reared back, the room shifted, darkening as whispers filled the air. A voice hummed in unison with their beating hearts, an echo of dread. What lay beneath their strained bonds? What truths would surface if they dared to confront the darkness inside? The world around them hummed with impending chaos, and with every breath, they teetered on the edge of something far darker than any one of them could understand. But was it too late to turn back? Or was the only way forward through the very darkness they had been trying to escape? The shadows shifted again, pressing in tighter, stifling their gasp for light. Danny felt a frigid hand clutch his heart, a visceral reminder that the specters weren't just in their minds. They were trapped in this physical manifestation of their darkest fears. He glanced at the nurse, desperately searching for some sign of strength. "Stick together. We can beat this." Her voice remained a lifeline, a flicker in the abyss, but her eyes betrayed her turmoil, the flickering uncertainty deep within her soul. David's breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale dragging memories closer, memories of screams and flames. What if the darkness reveals everything we fear? His voice shook as he felt another pull, a whisper in the back of his mind urging him to give in. The figure of Emily loomed larger now, an echo of their shared past that wove guilt and torment into the air. "Fight it!" David shouted, defiance hidden behind his rising panic. "We cannot leave anyone behind again." As if enraged by their defiance, the entity surged, tendrils reaching like fingers for their throats. "Leave behind? You left me to rot. How many more will you abandon? You are no guardians, just shadows of your failures." The words slithered into their minds, igniting the cowardice buried deep. Danny's fists trembled with rage, hot waves flowing through him. "You think we will bow to you? We are not the weak ones anymore." He took a step forward, channeling all the pain into his voice. "Emily, you fought. You were never meant to be forgotten." But the shadows writhed and twisted, each word met with resistance from the dark. "No," Emily screamed, and in that moment, her despair shattered something inside each of them. "Do you think I wanted to die alone?" The air crackled with a tension that felt alive, every breath shaking with the weight of her lost hope. Suddenly, the room shifted, light flickering as the shadows pulsed in a savage rhythm. Within the chaos, a radiant glow began to forge through the darkness. The nurse reached out instinctively, feeling a light bloom from within her own heart, a deep-seated hope she had buried for too long. Together, she called, locking eyes with each person, urging them to find their own light, to let it illuminate their shared fears. Breathe in what was but exhale the shadows that bind you. We are stronger now. The entity howled, furious and desperate to snuff out this burgeoning light. Its form twisted grotesquely, a swirling vortex of anger and despair. Hope is for fools. You are nothing without your scars. But now, under the pressure of their shared resolve, the dim bursts of light began to push back. Danny, David, and the nurse stepped forward in unison, hands clasped tightly. Each pulse of their hearts seemed to fuel the growing glow. They were gathering their memories not as burdens but as lessons, stitching together a tapestry of bravery from the pain. We are more than what you see, Danny bellowed, vulnerability clawing at his throat, yet igniting courage within. Together we redefine ourselves. As those words left his mouth, the shadows recoiled, the grasping tendrils losing strength. The air shimmered, the entities around them flickering like a poor projection. But then, just as hope began to flood the room like a tidal wave, a piercing shriek echoed from the depths of the dark. The shadows tore away, revealing a door, a passage cloaked in a swirling mist that beckoned them with a cold whisper. Will you embrace the unknown? Or will you remain shackled by your choices? Breath held tight in their chests, they glanced at each other. A fleeting moment of hesitation and fear. Would stepping through that door bring freedom or destroy them? In this moment of truth, they stood on the precipice, ready to dive into the madness, but one question echoed through their hearts. Were they truly prepared to face the darkness that awaited beyond, or were they still haunted by the ghosts of their pasts? The flickering lights cast unsettling shadows, and a collective breath held tightly to their chests hung heavy in the air, thick as fog. The swirling mist from the door promised either salvation or doom, but none of the gathered souls could move from their spots on the floor, nailed there by an unseen weight of fear and doubt. Together, the nurse repeated fiercely, her heart racing, we must choose together. Her plea echoed softly, but inside, she felt doubt clawing at her resolve. Will we step into the unknown again? Or will we remain prisoners of our past? Danny's gaze swept the room, his chest heaving with anxiety mixed with newfound determination. We can't allow the darkness to win, he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Whatever lies ahead, we face it as a team. His words sparked a fire in David, stirring a rising tide of courage that had lain dormant for too long. Remember what we fought for, what we lost. Everything has brought us here. Let it be a light, not a burden. The weight of loss and regret still wrapped around them, but they were no longer just victims. They were survivors. Each of them felt that seed of defiance growing within, thawing the petrified fear that had gripped them for so long. Now, the nurse shouted, fingers intertwined with Danny S. and David S., their hearts pounding in unison. Let us show it the strength we carry. We are not alone. Building off each other's resolve, their voices crescendoed into a powerful chant, a declaration against the darkness that had threatened to consume them. Together they stepped forward, hearts blazing with shared purpose. As they approached the door, the swirling mist began to swirl more violently, bucking against its limits like a raging storm. Don't look back, David urged, shaking off the desperate tendrils that reached for him. We can either let our past haunt us, or we can embrace who we've become. And with that, he pushed forward, stepping firmly through the mist. The world swirled around him, colors bleeding into each other until nothing remained of his past but a distant echo. Danny and the nurse followed. Each step taken felt more liberating than the last, as if shedding chains that had held them captive. Voices, screams, and whispers receded behind them, fading into silence as they pressed deeper into the unknown. Suddenly, they emerged into a vast, open field, vibrantly alive with sunlight. It was surreal, a stark contrast to the suffocating shadows they had just fled. It worked, Danny breathed, disbelief washing over him like a warm wave. But it wasn't just the landscape that struck them. It was a perfume of possibilities that surrounded them, a terrain free from the darkness that had held sway for too long. This is our life now, the nurse whispered, her eyes shimmering with tears of relief. We've confronted our deepest fears and chosen to embrace the light. They turned to face the shimmering path behind them, the door that had once loomed like a perilous cliff now standing silently, a memory carved into the sunlight. Their pasts would always be a part of them, but they had chosen to walk into a stronger future. Together, Danny repeated, the word hanging in the air like a promise. No more shadows, no turning back. With that, they clasped hands tightly, hearts synchronized with hope as they started their new journey together, leaving behind the ethereal weight of regret. The shadows that once defined them melted away behind the door, dimming into the past where they belonged as they walked further into the warmth of this new day. Each step gained strength. Their laughter echoed in the air, an anthem of renewed freedom, echoing across the boundless landscape. With pure hearts beating as one, they stepped into their future, ready to face whatever awaited with courage and unity. Now, before you leave, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will grip your heart and soul. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm, ensuring more thrilling tales come your way. And don't just walk away, quietly flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling resolution. Let's hear your thoughts. What did it all mean for you? Lastly, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand how important it is to support the channel through these actions. Thank you for being here.